Lieutenant Commander Allison Wright stood at the large window of the observation deck. She watched the training field below where 20 human cadets ran through their exercises. Their movements were quick and powerful. Even from this distance, she could see the determination on their faces. These young men and women were the first humans to train at the Galactic Coalition Academy. Most aliens in the Coalition viewed humans as dangerous Deathworlders, but Wright saw something else. She saw the future of cooperation between different species across the stars. The morning sun reflected off the metal buildings of the Academy. The air smelled clean here on Centauri Prime, much different from the crowded cities of Earth. Wright checked her tablet, reviewing the performance scores of her cadets. They were impressive, even by human standards. By alien standards, they were almost frightening. Jack Harlow led the cadets through their morning drills. He was a tall young man who grew up on a farm in Iowa before joining the space program. His shoulders were broad and his arms strong from years of farm work. But it wasn't just his physical strength that made him special. Jack had a mind for tactics that impressed even the four-armed Varaxian combat teachers. "Left formation, move," Jack called out. The cadets responded instantly, shifting into a new pattern across the field. Melissa Garcia moved fastest of all. Before joining the academy, she had been a champion swimmer back on Earth. Her endurance was legendary among the cadets. She could run for hours without stopping while others fell behind, gasping for breath. "They're not ready," said a soft voice beside Wright. Wright turned to see Ambassador Kelthara, an Exorian with skin so thin it was almost see-through. The alien's large eyes blinked slowly as they watched the humans train. "The coalition races are uncomfortable with human integration," Kelthara continued. The ambassador's voice had a musical quality like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Many fear what humans might do if given access to advanced weapons and ships." Wright nodded, understanding the concern. "That's why we're starting small. Just training exercises on the outer rim planets, nothing dangerous." On the field below, Cadet Ryan Summers was helping Nicole Bennett with her rifle stance. Ryan specialized in weapons while Nicole was the group's expert in taking things apart and sometimes blowing them up. They worked well together, as did all the cadets. They had to. They represented all of humanity now. "When do they leave for their first off-world exercise?" asked Kelthara. "Tomorrow morning," Wright replied. "They'll run drills on Nexus 7. It's a small moon with similar gravity to Earth. Should be perfect for their first real-world experience." Daniel Peterson jogged across the field carrying a large medical kit. He was the team's doctor, with steady hands that never shook even in the most stressful simulations. Beside him ran Owen Fletcher, talking excitedly while using his hands to communicate. Owen had a gift for languages and had already mastered 6 alien tongues. "I've reviewed their mission," said Kelthara, still watching the humans with those large, unblinking eyes. "It seems safe enough. They establish a base, defend against simulated attacks, and follow coalition protocols." "Exactly," Wright said with a smile. "Nothing they can't handle." What neither of them knew was that across the galaxy on the dark side of a dead moon, the Kargan High Command was meeting. The Kargans were a species of tall, scaled beings with 4 eyes and powerful jaws. They had long viewed the Galactic Coalition as weak and unworthy of the space they controlled. Supreme Leader Drakthor slammed his clawed fist onto the table. "The time for watching is over. The Coalition grows stronger each cycle. Now they bring in these humans." He spat the word like it was poison. "We've seen the reports. These creatures evolved on a death world with gravity that would crush most species. They can endure pain that would kill our strongest warriors. If they join fully with the Coalition, our advantage will be lost." The other Kargan leaders nodded in agreement. Their scales rattled with excitement at the thought of battle. "We strike now," Drakthor continued, "before they can prepare. Our first target will be here." He pointed to a holographic map showing a small moon, Nexus 7. "It houses a minor Coalition outpost and will soon host a training exercise for these human cadets. We will crush them quickly, showing the Coalition how weak their new allies truly are." The Kargan generals roared their approval, not knowing that they were about to face something their military had never encountered before. Back at the academy, the day was ending. The cadets gathered in their common room excited about their first off-world mission. "I can't believe we're finally getting out there," said Laura Keller, the team's best shot. She could hit targets at distances that amazed even the Sniperian instructors. "Real aliens, real planets. Just remember the protocols," Jack reminded them all. "We're representatives of Earth now. Everything we do reflects on our entire species." Brandon Wilson laughed from his seat by the window. "No pressure, right?" "No joke," said Eric Mason, who sat next to him tinkering with a small device. "I heard the Arcturians still think we eat other species." "Well, don't do that and we should be fine," Melissa said with a grin, making everyone laugh. Stephanie Hill was the last to join them, carrying her tablet filled with data on Nexus 7. "I've been studying the environment. It's pretty close to Earth standard, just less oxygen in the atmosphere. We might feel a little short of breath at first, but nothing serious." Jack nodded, looking around at his fellow cadets, his friends. "Get some sleep, everyone. Tomorrow, we make history as the first human training squad in Coalition space." They all headed to their rooms full of excitement about their mission. None of them knew that their simple training exercise would soon turn into the first battle of an interstellar war, a battle that would change how the entire galaxy viewed humanity. Lieutenant Commander Wright stayed on the observation deck long after the cadets had gone. She watched the stars appear as darkness fell, wondering if she was doing the right thing sending these young people so far from home. They were well trained, yes, but still so new to the galaxy and its dangers. "Be safe," she whispered to the stars. "Come back to us." Across those same stars, the Kargan fleet was already moving into position, ready to strike Nexus 7 and the unsuspecting humans who would soon arrive there. The dropship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Nexus 7. Inside, 20 human cadets sat strapped into their seats, gripping their training rifles. Through the small windows, they could see the moon's surface coming closer. It was mostly covered in dense purple forests with patches of rocky plains scattered across the landscape. Cadet Ryan Summers felt his stomach twist, but not from the turbulence. This was their first real mission off Earth, and even though it was just a training exercise, he couldn't help feeling nervous. He glanced at Nicole Bennett sitting next to him. She was busy checking her demolitions kit, her fingers moving quickly over each tool and device. Nicole could take apart any machine blindfolded, a skill that had earned her top marks at the academy. Across from them sat Daniel Peterson, the team's medic. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was slow and steady. Everyone knew Daniel had the steadiest hands in the group. During their toughest training, when others panicked, Daniel remained calm. 5 minutes to landing, announced their Torlian instructor. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall with 4 muscular arms. All 4, hands now pointed to different parts of a holographic map floating in the center of the ship. "Remember, this is a standard training mission. You will establish a base, defend it from simulated attacks, and learn coalition protocols." Jack Harlow, the team leader, studied the map closely. "Sir, what's the situation with the coalition outpost? Will they be supporting our exercise?" The Torlian nodded his large head. "They are expecting us. The outpost has a small staff of 15 personnel who will observe but not interfere unless there is a real emergency." Owen Fletcher sat beside Jack, mouthing alien words to himself. As the team's communication specialist, he had learned 6 alien languages and was working on his 7th. "The local dialect has some tricky sounds," he whispered to Jack. "I've been practicing all week." The ship rocked suddenly, harder than before. Lights flickered inside the cabin. "Just atmospheric interference," the Torlian instructor said, but his upper hands gripped a support bar tightly. Melissa Garcia, sitting in the front row, frowned. "That didn't feel like turbulence, sir." Before the instructor could respond, their communication system crackled with static before going completely silent. The holographic map disappeared. "Communication systems down," the pilot called from the cockpit. Switching to backup. Laura Keller, the team's sniper, moved to a window. She adjusted her glasses as she peered outside. "There's smoke rising from the direction of the outpost," she said quietly. The cadets exchanged worried glances. This wasn't part of the training scenario they had been briefed on. The ship descended rapidly now, the pilot clearly in a hurry to land. When they touched down, it wasn't on the smooth landing pad they had expected, but in a clearing among the purple trees, about 2 miles from the outpost. "Equipment check," Jack ordered, switching immediately to the command voice they all recognized from training. "Full gear, live ammunition." He turned to the Torlian instructor. "Sir, what are your orders?" The alien's face was grim. "This is not part of the exercise. Something is wrong." He tapped commands into his wrist device without success. "All communications are being jammed. We need to reach the outpost and assess the situation." The rear door of the ship opened with a hiss, and the cadets filed out, their training kicking in automatically. They formed a defensive perimeter around the ship while Jack, Melissa, and the instructor discussed their next move. The air on Nexus 7 was thinner than Earth's, just as Stephanie Hill had predicted. The cadets took deeper breaths as they adjusted. The planet smelled strange, a mix of sweet flowers and something metallic. "Movement in the trees," Laura called quietly, her sharp eyes scanning the forest's edge. "About 200 yards east." Jack signaled for everyone to take cover. The cadets moved quickly, finding positions behind rocks and fallen trees. Owen Fletcher worked frantically with his communication device. "The jamming is strong, but I might be able to break through on a narrower band." "Keep trying," Jack said. "Stephanie, what do we know about local wildlife? Could that be what Laura spotted?" Stephanie shook her head. "Nexus 7 has small herbivores and some flying creatures, but nothing large enough to register as the movement Laura saw." Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of energy weapons firing came from the direction of the outpost. The sound echoed through the forest, sending small flying creatures bursting from the trees in panic. "That's not part of any training exercise," the Torlian instructor said, his voice tense. "Those are Kargan heavy rifles." "Kargans?" Eric Mason asked. "The Coalition is at war with them?" "Not officially," the instructor replied, "but there have been border disputes for years." Jack's mind raced. This wasn't a simulation anymore. This was real combat. He looked at his fellow cadets, seeing the same realization dawning on their faces. "All right, listen up," he said, keeping his voice calm and firm. "This isn't what we expected, but it's what we've got. Our first priority is to reach the outpost and help any survivors. Then we need to find a way to contact the Coalition fleet." Brandon Wilson, who had been scouting ahead, returned quickly. "I found a stream that leads toward the outpost. The banks are covered with dense vegetation. It would give us good cover to move closer." Jack nodded. "Good work. We'll move along the stream. Laura, you and Eric take point. Keep your eyes open." The cadets moved out in formation, their training taking over despite the sudden change in circumstances. They advanced along the stream, staying low and moving quietly through the strange purple foliage. As they got closer to the outpost, they began to see signs of battle. Scorched trees, debris scattered across the ground, and the occasional gleam of metal from what might be ship parts. Laura, at the front of the group, suddenly held up her hand signaling everyone to stop. Through her scope, she could see figures. Moving around the outpost, they weren't Coalition personnel. "Kargans," she whispered when Jack crawled up beside her. "At least 20 that I can see. They're setting up defensive positions." Jack studied the situation through his binoculars. The outpost showed signs of damage, with smoke rising from one section. He could see Coalition personnel being herded into a central area guarded by armed Kargans. "They've taken prisoners," he said, "and they're digging in, not leaving." The Torlian instructor's face was grim. "This is no raid. This is an invasion force, likely the first wave." Daniel Peterson spoke up. "Some of those Coalition personnel may need medical attention." Jack nodded. "First, we need more information. Owen, any luck with communications?" "Nothing yet," Owen replied, "but I might be able to tap into the outpost's backup systems if we get closer." Jack looked at his team. They were cadets, trained but untested. Now they faced a real enemy in what Might be the first battle of a new war. But as he looked at their determined faces, he knew they were ready. "We're going to help those people," he said firmly. "Melissa, take Brandon and Stephanie and circle around to the east. Look for a weakness in their perimeter. Nicole, I need you to check what supplies we have that could be used as distractions or traps. The rest of you, we're going to find a better observation point and make a plan." As the cadets moved to their tasks, Owen Fletcher suddenly grabbed Jack's arm. "Wait," he said, his eyes wide. "I'm picking up a transmission. It's not Coalition standard." "Kargans?" Jack asked. Owen shook his head. "No, it's a distress call. From another ship. There are more people out there." The mission had just gotten more complicated, but Jack's expression remained determined. They weren't just cadets anymore. They were soldiers in a war they never expected to fight. The human cadets gathered in a small cave they found near the stream. Outside, the purple forest of Nexus 7 grew darker as the planet's sun began to set. Jack Harlow spread out a rough map he had drawn of the area. "The Kargans control the outpost. Here," he said, pointing to a circle on the map. "They have about 20 soldiers that we can see, but there might be more inside." The Torlian instructor nodded, his forearms crossed over his chest. "The Kargans are methodical. They will have patrols searching the area soon." "What about the distress signal?" Melissa Garcia asked, looking at Owen Fletcher, who was still working with his communication device. "I've almost got it," Owen replied, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. "It's coming from about 3 miles north of here. The signal is weak, but I think it's from a Coalition scout ship." Jack thought for a moment. "We need to split up. One team will check out the distress signal. The other will watch the outpost and look for a way to help the prisoners." "That's risky," the instructor warned. "You have limited weapons and no backup." Jack looked at his fellow cadets. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes, but they were also determined. "We didn't come all this way to hide in a cave." The instructor stared at Jack for a long moment, then nodded. "Your training was not just for show. What's your plan?" Jack pointed to different spots on his map. "Melissa will lead Nicole, Brandon, and Eric to find the source of the distress signal. They'll see if there are survivors who can help us. The rest of us will observe the outpost and look for weaknesses in the Kargan security." "What about me?" the instructor asked. "With respect, sir," Jack said carefully, "you stand out. The Kargans would spot you instantly. We need you to stay here and work with Owen to try to break through the jamming. If we can contact the Coalition fleet, we might have a chance." The alien considered this, then agreed. "Your logic is sound, Cadet Harlow." The teams prepared quickly. Melissa checked her weapon, then looked at her team. "Stay close and move quietly. If we run into trouble, we retreat back here, no heroes." Nicole, Brandon, and Eric nodded. They all looked nervous but ready. Meanwhile, Jack briefed his team. "Laura, I need you to find a good position to watch the outpost with your scope. Stephanie, use your knowledge of Coalition structures to find potential weak points. Daniel, prepare your medical supplies. We might need them soon." Ryan Summers checked his rifle. "And what will you be doing, Jack?" "I'm going to get closer to the outpost," Jack replied. "I need to see exactly what we're dealing with." As the two teams prepared to leave, Owen suddenly jumped up. "I've got it. The signal is clearer now." Everyone gathered around as a broken voice came through Owen's device. "Any Coalition forces and under attack? 5 survivors. Low on supplies. Can you respond?" Jack asked. Owen shook his head. "Not without the Kargans hearing us too. But now we know there are people alive out there." Melissa's team left. First, moving quietly through the forest toward the distress signal. The purple plants around them seemed to glow slightly in the growing darkness, providing just enough light to see. "This is crazy," Eric whispered as they walked. "We're supposed to be running drills, not fighting an actual war." "Consider it extra credit," Nicole replied with a small smile, trying to keep spirits up. Brandon moved ahead, using skills he learned growing up in the wilderness of Montana. He stopped suddenly, raising his hand. The others froze. "Kargan patrol," he whispered, pointing through the trees. About 50 yards away, 3 Kargan soldiers moved through the forest. They were tall, with scaled skin and 4 eyes that seemed to glow yellow in the dim light. They carried large energy rifles and wore armor that reflected the purple glow of the plants. Melissa signaled her team to stay low and still. They barely breathed as the patrol passed by, just 30 feet from their position. Once the danger had passed, they continued more carefully than before. Back near the outpost, Jack crawled through the underbrush, getting as close as he dared. From his new position, he could see the Kargan forces more clearly. They had set up energy barriers around the outpost and positioned guards at all entrances. The coalition prisoners sat in a group in the central courtyard. Jack counted 12, with some showing signs of injury. He recognized the species, mostly Arcturians and Galtonians, the typical staff for an outer rim outpost. Jack retreated back to where Laura had set up her observation position in a tall tree. "What do you see?" he asked. Laura adjusted her scope. "They're bringing equipment from their ships into the outpost. Looks like they plan to stay a while, and they've set up a communication array on the roof." "That must be what's jamming our signals," Jack said. "If we could disable it." "I might be able to hit it from here," Laura offered, "but it would alert every Kargan to our presence." Jack shook his head. "We need a better plan." Meanwhile, Melissa's team had reached the source of the distress signal. It was a small coalition scout ship that had crash-landed in a clearing. The ship was damaged but mostly intact. "Hello?" Melissa called quietly as they approached. "We're from the Galactic Coalition Academy." A figure appeared at the ship's hatch, holding a weapon. "Stay. Where you are?" "We're human cadets," Melissa said, raising her hands. "We're here to help." The figure hesitated, then lowered the weapon. "Humans? What are you doing on Nexus 7? "We were supposed to be training," Eric explained as they moved closer. "Instead, we found the outpost under attack." The figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a Vexillion, a bird-like species known for their piloting skills. His feathers were ruffled and stained, and one wing hung awkwardly at his side. "I'm Lieutenant Ziv," he said. "We were on patrol when the Kargans attacked. They shot us, down before we could send a warning." He looked at the 4 human cadets with his sharp eyes. "Are you all that's left of the coalition forces?" "There are more of us," Melissa explained. 20 cadets total, plus our instructor. "We're trying to help the prisoners at the outpost." Ziv clicked his beak in what might have been a laugh. 20 cadets against a Kargan invasion force? That's suicide." Brandon stepped forward. "How many Kargans are there?" "At least 50 that we saw," Ziv replied. "With more probably on the way, this isn't just a raid. They're establishing a foothold for a larger force." Nicole had been examining the ship. "Your communications are damaged, but I might be able to repair them. If we could send a message to the coalition fleet." Ziv nodded. "Our engineer was killed, in the crash. If you can fix it, there's a chance." Back at the cave, Owen and the Torlian instructor worked on breaking through the jamming signal. "The Kargans are using a rotating frequency," the instructor explained. "Standard military procedure." Owen thought for a moment. "What if we don't try to break it? What if we ride it instead?" "Explain," the instructor said. "If we can identify the pattern of rotation, we might be able to piggyback our signal on theirs. They'd carry our message for us." The instructor's eyes widened. "That's not standard procedure. It might work." As night fully fell on Nexus 7, the human cadets prepared for action. Jack's team returned to the cave to share what they had learned about the outpost. Shortly after, Melissa's team arrived with Lieutenant Ziv and 4 other survivors from the scout ship. Jack looked at the assembled group, 20 human cadets, 6 coalition aliens, all looking to him for leadership. The odds were against them, but giving up wasn't an option. "Here's what we know," Jack said to everyone. "The Kargans have taken the outpost. They're jamming communications and bringing in equipment for a larger force. We have limited weapons and supplies. So we're doomed," one of the scout ship survivors said. Jack shook his head. "No, we have something the Kargans don't expect." "What's that?" Ziv asked. Jack looked at his fellow humans. "Us, humans, Deathworlders." He smiled slightly. "And we're about to show the Kargans why that name matters." The human cadets worked through the night. They gathered around a small light in the cave, careful not to make it too bright. Jack Harlow stood in the center, explaining his plan to everyone. "The Kargans have 3 weaknesses," he said. "First, they don't know we're here. Second, they're used to fighting enemies who use the same tactics they do. And third, they've never fought humans before." Lieutenant Ziv, the bird-like Vexillian from the crashed scout ship, clicked his beak. "Your confidence is admirable, but the Kargans are elite warriors. They've conquered many worlds." "But not Earth," Ryan Summers pointed out. "Not a death world." Jack nodded. "We won't beat them with direct attacks. We'll use what makes us different." He turned to Brandon Wilson. "Brandon, you grew up hunting in the forests of Montana. Could you set traps using what we have here?" Brandon thought for a moment, looking at the supplies they had gathered. "I can make snares and tripwires, nothing fancy, but they'll work." "Good. You and Eric will set traps around the outpost, not to kill, but to confuse and separate the Kargan patrols." Jack then looked at Nicole Bennett. "Nicole, we need explosives. Something loud, but not deadly." Nicole smiled. "I can make noisemakers from some of the gear in our dropship. They'll sound like weapons fire, but won't hurt anyone." "Perfect." Jack continued assigning tasks. "Melissa, you and your team will create a distraction on the east side of the outpost. Laura will find a position to take out the communication jammer on the roof when I give the signal." "And what will you be doing?" Stephanie Hill asked. "I'll be leading a small team to free the prisoners while the Kargans are distracted," Jack replied. The Torlian instructor watched with interest. "This plan is unconventional." "That's the point," Jack said. "The Kargans expect conventional." Owen Fletcher raised his hand. "I've been working on the communications problem. If Laura can disable their jammer, I think I can send a message to the Coalition fleet. I've modified our transmitter to boost the signal. How long would it take the fleet to get here?" Jack asked Ziv. The Vexillian thought for a moment. "The nearest patrol is about 6 hours away at maximum speed." "Then we need to hold out for 6 hours after we send the message," Jack said. "We can do that." Daniel Peterson, the team's medic, spoke up. "I've been thinking about our physical advantages. Humans evolved on a high-gravity planet with 21% oxygen atmosphere. Nexus 7 has lower gravity and less oxygen than Earth." "What does that mean for us?" Melissa asked. "It means we can move faster and longer than the Kargans expect," Daniel explained. "They'll tire before we do." Jack smiled. "That's exactly the kind of advantage we need. Everyone gets some rest. We move out before dawn." As the others prepared their equipment or tried to sleep, Melissa approached Jack, who was studying the map again. "This isn't what we signed up for," she said quietly. Jack looked up at her. "No, it's not. But it's what we've got." "Some of us might not make it," she said, her voice steady but concerned. "I know," Jack replied. "That's why I need you leading the distraction team. You're the best runner we have. If things go wrong, you can lead the Kargans away from the others." Melissa nodded. "I won't let you down." As the night passed, the human cadets prepared themselves. They checked their weapons, adjusted their gear, and mentally prepared for what was to come. Brandon and Eric slipped out into the darkness to set their traps. They moved silently through the purple forest, using the skills they had learned in training. Brandon showed Eric how to use vines and branches to create simple but effective snares. "The key is to place them where they won't be noticed," Brandon whispered as he set a tripwire across a path. "When a Kargan patrol comes through here, they'll never see it until it's too late." Nicole worked with the equipment from their dropship, creating devices that would make loud bangs and flashes when activated. "These will make them think they're under attack from all sides," she explained to Stephanie, who was helping her. Before dawn, Jack gathered everyone together one last time. The cave was quiet as 20 human cadets and 6 alien allies listened to his final instructions. "Remember, our goal is to free the prisoners and contact the Coalition fleet," Jack said. "We're not trying to defeat the entire Kargan force. We just need to hold out until help arrives." The Torlian instructor stepped forward. "I have watched humans train for months, but I never truly understood what made your species special until now. You adapt. You find solutions where others see only problems." Jack nodded his thanks. Let's move out. They left the cave in groups, spreading out through the forest as the first light of dawn began to appear. Melissa led her team to the east side of the outpost, while Brandon and Eric checked their traps. Nicole positioned her noisemakers at strategic points around the perimeter. Laura found a tall tree with a clear view of the outpost roof and the communication jammer. She climbed up with her rifle and settled into position. "In place," she whispered into her communicator. One by one, the other teams reported they were ready. Jack, Ryan, and Daniel crouched in the underbrush near the west entrance of the outpost, waiting for the signal to move. "Now," Jack said into his communicator. Nicole activated her first noisemaker. A loud explosion echoed through the forest to the north of the outpost. Kargan soldiers rushed to investigate, weapons ready. Seconds later, another explosion sounded from the south, then another from the east. "They're splitting up their forces," Ryan observed, as they watched Kargans running in different directions. On the east side, Melissa's team began making noise, drawing more Kargans in their direction. When a patrol of 5 Kargans approached their position, Melissa stepped out just long enough to be seen, then disappeared into the trees. The Kargans followed, chasing what they thought was an easy target. What they didn't know was that Melissa had been a champion runner on Earth. In the lower gravity of Nexus 7, she moved with incredible speed, leading the Kargans straight into the traps Brandon and Eric had set. The first Kargan hit a tripwire and fell hard. The second got caught in a snare that yanked him off his feet. The others stopped in confusion, suddenly unsure if they were the hunters or the hunted. Back at the outpost, the chaos was growing. Kargans rushed from point to point, trying to respond to what seemed like attacks from all sides. In the confusion, no one noticed Laura taking aim at the communication jammer on the roof. She took a deep breath, adjusted for the wind, and fired. Her shot hit perfectly, sending sparks flying from the jammer. "Jammer down," she reported. "Owen, you're up." Owen, back at the cave with the Torlian instructor, immediately began broadcasting their distress signal. "Coalition fleet, this is Cadet Owen Fletcher from Earth. Nexus 7 outpost is under Kargan attack. 20 cadets and 6 survivors requesting immediate assistance." At the west entrance, Jack saw his opportunity. "Move in," he ordered. He, Ryan, and Daniel rushed forward, using the confusion to slip into the outpost unnoticed. Inside, they found 2 Kargan guards watching the prisoners. The humans moved quickly. Ryan tackled one guard while Jack engaged the other. The fight was brief but intense. The Kargans were strong, but the humans were faster than they expected. With both guards subdued, Jack quickly freed the prisoners. "We're here to help," he told the surprised coalition personnel. "But we need to move fast." Outside, the situation was escalating. The Kargan commander had realized they were under attack by a small force. He ordered his troops to regroup and search the forest systematically. What he didn't understand was who he was fighting. Humans didn't fight like any species he had encountered before. They didn't follow standard military protocols. They used the environment, set traps, created distractions, and disappeared into the forest only to strike again from another direction. The commander stood in the outpost control room, looking at reports of his scattered forces. He had come expecting an easy victory over a small coalition outpost. Instead, he found himself facing an enemy he couldn't predict or understand. "Find them," he roared. "Find these humans and destroy them." But the humans had no intention of being found. Not until the coalition fleet arrived to even the odds. 6 hours passed like a whirlwind of activity. The human cadets had freed the coalition prisoners and led them back to the cave. Now they defended their position against waves of increasingly frustrated Kargan soldiers. The Kargans had superior numbers and better weapons, but the humans had something else entirely. The adaptability of a species that evolved on a planet trying to kill them every day. Jack Harlow crouched behind a fallen log, catching his breath. Beside him, Ryan Summers fired carefully placed shots to keep the Kargans at bay. "How much longer?" Ryan asked, not taking his eyes off the forest ahead. Jack checked his timer. "The coalition fleet should be here any minute." We just need to hold. Out. Across their makeshift perimeter, Melissa Garcia and her team had set up a defensive position using branches and rocks. Every time the Kargans tried to advance, she and her team would appear briefly, fire a few shots, and vanish again before the Kargans could get a fix on their position. "They're learning," Melissa reported over the communicator. "They're starting to predict where we'll appear." "Switch it up," Jack ordered. "Use the lower gravity. Jump higher than they expect. Move to places they think you can't reach." Nicole. Bennett had rigged the remaining noisemakers to remote detonators. "I've got 3 left," she told Jack, using them sparingly. Inside the cave, Daniel Peterson treated the injured coalition personnel while Owen Fletcher monitored their communications. "I'm still broadcasting our location to the fleet," Owen said. "But I'm getting a lot of Kargan chatter too. They sound angry." Lieutenant Ziv, his wing now properly bandaged, joined Jack at the defensive line. "Your tactics are unusual," the Vexillian observed. "The Kargans are elite warriors, but they fight by a strict code. You humans fight like the wilderness itself." Jack nodded. "On Earth we learn to adapt or die. It's in our blood." In the Kargan command ship hovering above the outpost, Commander Drakthor slammed his fist on the console. "How can 20 untrained humans cause so much chaos?" he roared at his officers. "They're cadets, not soldiers." His second-in-command looked nervous. "They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They set traps, they use the terrain. They appear and disappear. Our soldiers report they never tire even after hours of pursuit." "They're just humans," Drakthor growled. "Capture their leaders. The rest will fall into line." Back at the defensive line, Laura Keller spotted movement from her position in a tall tree. "We've got a problem," she reported. "They're bringing in heavier weapons, looks like a pulse cannon." Jack thought quickly. "Nicole, use your last noisemaker to the east. Brandon, Eric, can you rig something bigger? Something that will really grab their attention?" Brandon and Eric looked at each other, then nodded. "We can rig the fuel cells from the dropship," Eric suggested. "It would make a big enough explosion to draw them away." "Do it," Jack ordered. "But be careful." As Brandon and Eric slipped away to set up their diversion, Jack reorganized their defenses. The Kargans were getting closer with each attack, learning the humans' patterns. "We need to hold out just a little longer," Jack encouraged his tired teammates. "The fleet is coming." Stephanie Hill, who had been monitoring the skies, suddenly pointed up. "Look, in the clouds." Through a break in the purple clouds above, they could see flashes of light. The distinctive sound of coalition ship engines roared. "Overhead, they're here," Owen shouted from the cave entrance. "Coalition fleet is engaging the Kargan ships." Hope surged through the exhausted cadets, but on the ground they still faced dozens of Kargan soldiers who now had nothing to lose. "They're going to make one final push," Jack warned everyone. "Get ready." Sure enough, the Kargans began to advance from all sides. No longer bothering, with caution, they fired continuously, forcing the humans to stay down. "Brandon, Eric, now would be a good time for that diversion," Jack said urgently into his communicator. "Ready in 3, 2, 1. Brandon replied. A massive explosion rocked the forest to the west. The rigged fuel cells created a fireball that rose above the trees. Many of the Kargans turned toward the explosion, momentarily distracted. "Now," Jack shouted. "Everything we've got." The humans fired in unison, forcing the Kargans to take cover. Nicole triggered her remaining noisemakers, creating chaos and confusion among the Kargan forces. In the sky above, coalition ships were clearly winning against the surprised Kargan fleet. Several Kargan ships were already retreating, while others had been disabled. The Torlian instructor, who had been monitoring coalition communications, suddenly spoke up. "Kargan command ship is hailing all forces. Listen." He held up his communicator so everyone could hear the translation. "All Kargan forces, this is Commander Drakthor. Coalition fleet has broken our orbital defense. Ground forces are to cease engagement and prepare for extraction." A cheer went up from the humans, but Jack held up his hand for quiet. The transmission continued. We were not informed that humans would be defending Nexus 7. High Command did not authorize engagement with Deathworlders. Repeat, disengage and prepare for extraction. Silence fell over the human cadets as they processed what they had just heard. The Kargans, a feared military force across the galaxy, were retreating because they had encountered humans. Did they just say what I think they said? Ryan asked in disbelief. Jack nodded slowly. They're afraid of us. Not because we beat them, but because of what we are. Laura climbed down from her tree. They're actually pulling back. I can see them retreating toward their landing ships. Within minutes, Coalition ships landed in the clearing near the cave. Armed Coalition soldiers poured out, securing the area, but they found no Kargans to fight, only 20 exhausted but triumphant human cadets. Admiral Dren, a tall Arcturian and commander of the Coalition fleet, approached Jack. Cadet Harlow? I received your distress call. We came as quickly as we could. Thank you, Admiral, Jack replied, standing straight despite his exhaustion. The Kargans have retreated. We have injured Coalition personnel who need medical attention. Admiral, Dren looked around at the makeshift defenses, the signs of battle, and the tired but proud human cadets. You held off a Kargan invasion force? With 20 cadets? Lieutenant Ziv stepped forward. They did more than hold them off, Admiral. They forced them to retreat. The Kargans didn't want to fight humans once they realized what they were up against. The Admiral shook his head in amazement. In all my years, I've never seen Kargans retreat from a battle they started. He looked at Jack with new respect. What exactly did you do to them? Jack glanced at his fellow cadets, then back at the Admiral. We showed them what humans are capable of when protecting others. We adapted. We survived. Later, aboard the Coalition flagship, Admiral Dren addressed all 20 cadets. What you did on Nexus 7 was extraordinary. You were supposed to be on a training mission, but instead, you faced combat against one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy, and you prevailed. He paced in front of the lined-up cadets. More importantly, you've changed how the Kargan hegemony views the Coalition. They've sent a formal message indicating they wish to discuss terms for a ceasefire. They specifically mentioned the presence of humans as a factor in their strategic reconsideration. Melissa leaned over slightly to whisper to Jack. Is he saying they're afraid of us? Jack kept his face straight, but whispered back, I think he's saying they're afraid of what 20 untrained humans could do. Imagine if we were actually trying, Admiral Dren continued. The Coalition Council has voted unanimously to fast-track human integration into our defense forces. Your actions have proven that humans bring something unique to the galaxy. He smiled at the cadets. You came to learn from us, but you've taught the galaxy something instead. Sometimes the most dangerous species can also be the most valuable allies. Jack looked at his fellow cadets, tired, bruised, but standing tall. They had come to Nexus 7 as students but would leave as legends. The Deathworlders had arrived in the galactic community, and nothing would ever be the same again.